Hello and welcome, everyone. It's chapter 6 time. I've reviewed the exam and I'm going to actually just go through quickly chapter 6 to highlight some of the things that are going to be on the test so you have a better way to study for the exam. So chapter 6 is all about adolescence. There's a picture of my own personal adolescent, my little Annie. All right, so puberty, this lovely time of life when people are going and growing through all sorts of physical development and cognitive development, etc. So just a quick definition here, spermarchy is the first ejaculation of semen, whereas menarche is the girl's first menstruation. We know there's marked height and weight gains, but just generally speaking, the definition of spermarchy and menarche. And you can see here the height gain of boys and girls. Girls typically grow sooner, I should say, grow sooner than boys, but boys eventually catch up. This is why in middle school you don't have girls and boys at the same height for that awkward middle school dance. All right, let's move on here. Some more about puberty that you can read, most of which you will get in your biology classes and other healthcare classes. The adolescent brain. So a couple things about this brain. This is the great mismatch, which I think I've talked about in class before. So with teenagers, the frontal part of the brain, or this part up here, that's the part that regulates your impulse control, your organization. This is when you plan out your day of, I'm going to get up, get dressed, I've got this class, I've got this homework assignment, whatever it might be. That's the part of your brain that kind of regulates all those organizational things. This doesn't fully develop until you're in your mid-20s. So even though it's pretty much on a good track right now, I'm touching my face a lot, I'm sorry. But even though it's on a good track right now, it actually doesn't fully develop until you're in your mid-20s. Now, the limbic system, remember, that's the part of your brain that's all about the pleasure and the reward. So the limbic system has that hypothalamus in it, which is all the part of your brain that controls hunger and sex drive and sleep drive and all of those things. It's really your pleasure center is what we like to refer to it as. So that part is actually totally developed, ready to go when you're a teenager. That frontal part, the part that sort of helps you control what you choose to do and what's responsible choice making, that part doesn't develop until later. So with teenagers, there's this great mismatch of the whole thing. So teenagers sometimes do things like stay out past curfew because they just feel like it. And it's really truly because that limbic system is overriding the frontal lobe. So teenagers sometimes will come home and say, I don't know why I stayed out so late. I just felt like it. Parents who understand this mismatch can understand why the adolescent might have made that choice. It still doesn't excuse the behavior. It just sort of explains the behavior. Half of mental illness occurs by the age of 14, and 75% occurs by the age of 24. One of the most common mental illnesses we see that doesn't show up until about the age of 18 to 24 is schizophrenia. We typically don't see that progress or actually pop up until that point. Someone can have a totally normal life and then all of a sudden at 21 start to hear voices or have delusions or hallucinations or all sorts of things. Typically, we know that someone's going to have other kinds of mental illness when they're even a teenager. Sometimes there's drug exposure issues. The benefit of the adolescent brain is that you tend to, teenagers are a little bit more on the risk-taking side. And so because of that mismatch of the brain of wanting pleasure or wanting to engage in risky behaviors, that's all a good thing, because if we didn't have risky behavior kinds of things, if we always let that frontal lobe sort of block us or have responsible decision-making, we would never meet new people. You would never seek out new situations. Your first couple of weeks at campus or at a college would be very different if you were constantly worried about, well, maybe I shouldn't go to that party, or maybe I shouldn't engage and meet that new person. If you didn't have that risk-taking behavior, people would never meet other people, and quite frankly, we would never populate the earth. We need to have new relationships formed so that people can procreate and make. Teenagers and sleep. So remember when you were a teenager and you didn't really go to sleep at 10 o'clock or even midnight? Sometimes it was more like 2 in the morning. Many of you are still in that sleep pattern. And it's probably even more awkward now that you're at home because you are living among people who go to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock. This is all about your circadian rhythm. It's all been pushed back a little bit as you become an adolescent. So most teenagers need about 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Now, your book says most teenagers get between 6.9 and 8.4 hours. I know from teaching students that many of them will tell me, no, I usually got when I was a teenager 4 to 6 hours of sleep each night. I understand, get it. You have to stick to what the book says, especially for your test. So the book says you need 8 to 10 hours, and people typically get 6.9 to 8.4. So what happens when people don't get enough sleep? They're sleepy, they're cranky, they fall asleep at school. Sometimes it can lead to feelings of depression or other things. They tend to drink caffeinated beverages. They tend to be at higher risk for substance abuse, car crashes, things that happen when you're tired, right? So best practice is to start school after 8:30 in the morning, because at least at that point, you can actually have a little bit more rest. Test grades will improve. Life gets a little bit better if you can start school a little bit later. Right. Something I wanted to point out here, this is talking about teen pregnancy. The United States is number one among all other countries. We have been for years. I know the graph kind of cuts off here at the year 2000, but trust me, it keeps going. The US is ranked number one for teen pregnancy, which is sort of an interesting concept given how much wealth we have in this country and other things, and education about how teen pregnancy works. You'll notice that England, Canada, France, Sweden, countries that we consider comparable to the United States, pregnancy rate is much lower. So just something to note is that America, we rank first for something all over again. All right, let's talk eating disorders. So here's sort of what I call the big three. Anorexia, which most people know, is this fear of gaining weight. It's a restriction or energy intake issue. People with anorexia eat very, very little food. They typically eat very little calories. Once read a biography on Ellen DeGeneres' wife, Portia, and she recovered from an eating disorder. And she said that she would often eat 3 saltine crackers and a stick of gum in a day. That would be all she has for the whole day. That would be all the number of calories she would allow herself to eat. I follow her on excuse me. I follow her on Instagram, and she clearly eats more than that now because she does all these cooking Instagram posts lately. All right, bulimia. This is recurrent episodes of binge eating. And so I had a client who did this once, and she would wake up in the middle of the night, and she would often have an entire chocolate cake, or she would eat last night's dinner. Like if there was a rotisserie chicken, she would eat the whole rest of the chicken, plus the cake, plus 3 bowls of cereal, plus, right? She would basically clean out her parents' fridge. She was about 24, 25 years old. She worked as a respiratory therapist. And she was living with her parents at the time because she was in between living situations. So she would get up about 2 o'clock in the morning and just binge on everything she could find in the refrigerator. And then she would try to purge everything out. Sometimes she purged, sometimes she didn't. And the important thing to note with eating disorders is that sometimes they have components that look like binging and purging, and sometimes they have components that look like anorexia. They often are not all the same. Sometimes there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. There are people who have eating disorders where they would eat a whole lot. They would only eat it and put it in their mouth, and it's called spit or spit and chew, chew and spit, whatever. They basically chew the food and spit it out. And then they would hide that chewed up food from their family members. So they would spit it out and go hide the garbage somewhere where nobody could find it. So the important thing to know is that eating disorders are often largely related to anxiety because eating is a way that we can control our behavior. So anxiety is a form of a disorder where people feel out of control. So having an eating disorder is a way that you can feel control of your situation. So all eating disorders, for the most part, come down to a feeling of anxiety, mixed with a little depression here and there, but for the most part, it's anxiety-based. But anorexia, bulimia, you've got those under control, you've got those figured out. Binge eating disorder, like I said, sometimes it's, just a bunch of eating. Sometimes people chew and spit, sometimes people just eat and they have no other thing going on. It's a relatively newer diagnosis, the DSM-5. These are some other things associated with eating disorders, more common in females, though I did see 2 men in therapy that, as patients, that both men had eating disorders. Typically, people who have anorexia will die of starvation, suicide. Usually someone who's anorexic, their heart stops beating. That's typically how they die. Treatment plans can be successful, but honestly, eating disorders and obsessive compulsive disorders are some of the hardest disorders to treat because a lot of times they go hand in hand. And so someone with anorexia might also have a comorbidity or another diagnosis of OCD. So a lot of times those two things go hand in hand, and it can be difficult to treat OCD or an eating disorder because in order for that person to break the cycle per se, they have to give up some of the control, and that can be very, very difficult. So treatment plans are possible. I really encourage you to watch these videos that I have linked down here about EDNOS and ARFID. Really interesting. EDNOS is eating disorder not otherwise specified. So that's a newer kind of pattern. And then ARFID, I don't remember the name of it altogether. I'm going to mess it up if I try to guess. But ARFID is one of the most common eating disorders where basically people are restricting their food intake, where they say to themselves, I'm only going to have 100 calories today, but they decide I'm only going to eat 15 gummy bears to be my 100 calories for the day. But they're also doing things like being super, super fresh and super healthy kinds of food. And that's all they'll ever eat. And they refuse to put a gummy bear in their mouth, and they refuse to put in a brownie. Instead, they just eat salad all day. So they're eating, but it may not be enough calories or enough protein and things like that. Okay, moving along. Let's talk about Piaget's operational stages of development. So remember we had talked before, Piaget had these other stages of development, pre-formal, concrete, those stages. So now we're in formal. So Piaget's stage of development called egocentrism. This is very common for teenagers. It's all about me, right? Egocentrism is all about, look at me or look what I'm doing. This is the social media craze, right? This is the selfie personified. So very, very egocentric teenagers. It's very common. Imaginary audience is everyone is watching me. This is why typically teenage girls, it could be boys too, will have a pimple or a zit pop up on their face, and they'll tell their parent, cannot possibly go to school today because everybody is going to be looking at my zit. That's an imaginary audience. That's when you think everybody is looking at you. They're really not looking at you. As 20-year-olds, you probably have also imagined this as when you go to the gym to go work out for the first time. Maybe it's a new gym, maybe it's your first or second time being there. You've never worked out in a gym before. People often think everyone's looking at me screw up this weight machine because I don't really know how to use this weight machine, or I'm on this treadmill but I don't really know which buttons to push to make it work. And you think everybody is looking at you, you're completely mortified, and you think the world is watching. They're not watching because they're all worried about how much they're screwing up at the gym. So that's the imaginary audience piece. The personal fable, nothing bad will happen because I am very special. This is why teenagers sadly get into cars after they've been drinking. This is why drinking and driving happens, because remember, we have that mismatch in the brain of the limbic system that says, I'm fine, I can drink, it's totally normal, I feel great, I have been drinking, I've been partying, nothing bad's gonna happen to me. The frontal lobe up here, the part that's the responsible part, the planner, the organizer, the one who should be taking logical kinds of things, isn't developed yet, remember? So between the mismatch in the brain and then this Piagetian idea of the personal fable, this is why we end up with dead teenagers. This is why people end up drinking and driving and crashing their cars, because between the mismatch of the brain and this personal fable, it's a bad combination. So when people do too much of that, that's when you're going to have disastrous results. Okay. Teen drivers. So crashes, again, because of that mismatch, more more likely to crash than experienced drivers. As a parent of a new young driver, Annie, she turned 16 during this crazy pandemic. She has not been able to celebrate her birthday with her friend. She never went on her study abroad trip because it was canceled. And she can't go to the DMV to get her driver's license on her 16th birthday because they're closed. So here's her car sitting in the driveway that she can't drive because she has no license to drive. We're still on the permit. So pandemic, frustrating. So crashes. So crashes with kids, with teenagers. Boys are twice as more likely to crash than girls. Boys typically, again, higher testosterone, mismatch in that brain, more likely to have the crash happen. Most distraction is the cause of most crashes. Distraction can be cell phone usage. It can be talking to a friend in the car. That's why there's laws about how many people teenagers can have at the car at a time. It's like so. Those laws, when they changed, have made a significant impact. Generally speaking, boys twice as much crash than girls. And boys' car insurance, as many of you know, is actually more expensive than girls' teenage girls' insurance. Okay. All right, let's talk about this moratorium in just